Utah State Representative Ken Ivory is here with us because he is making the rounds across the country, and he has a stop here in our own backyard talking about the Convention of States. Ken, how are you?
Steve, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So, Ken, before you came in, I was discussing one of the things that it's clear this last election shows we have to change on our side. And one of them is this notion that because the left hates it, it must be good, right? You know? So I had somebody, even though I sent out some judicial research that people at the Eagle Forum did on some of the names that are being bandied about as Trump's potential nominee to replace Antonin Scalia. So these are, like Andy Schlafly, who's an attorney, knows a lot more about this than I do. So I'd shared some of his information looking at some of these judges' precedents. And I had a gentleman with several thousand Twitter followers, conservative activists, come back at me with, I can't believe you think these two candidates aren't potentially conservative enough. Look at what Think Progress thinks about them. Because, listen, if this Merrick fellow that was denied Scalia's seat this past year, if that was Trump's nominee next week, Think Progress would be telling us that he's a terrible fascist who wants to, put everybody with a dissenting opinion on the left in prison. That's just the way the game is played. But our side is so conditioned to define who we are by that which we're against, that we don't ever really spend much time advancing what we're actually for, if you even know what that is anymore, which has me seriously doubting whether we are even capable of the kind of self-government that the Convention of States wants to actually hand us. How would you respond to that?
It's a great question. We've drifted very far, and so what you do is rather than throw your hands in the air and let the plane go out of control, you grab the wheel. My father was a pilot, and we would fly over the Grand Canyon from Phoenix to Utah all the time, and he would always say, your engine just went out, where are you going to land? You've got this much glide distance, where are you going to put it down? And he said, pilots perish when they panic. Fly the plane till it stops, you walk away. Constitutionally, it's not time to panic. Yeah, we've got some big problems. We've got big problems in education. We've got big problems in who we are as a people. Well, that's where you have leaders. There's nothing happening in our nation right now that leadership won't solve. And the leaders come from, in our system, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
That is exactly what I'm afraid of at the moment.
Well, but right now you've got 2 million people like this young lady that's the state director for COS in Iowa, Sarah Haldeman. I was talking to her last night. I said, tell me about why we have a Declaration of Independence. Why we have a Constitution. She said, oh, well, that's easy. We have a Declaration of Independence for liberty. Secure those blessings of liberty. That's why we have a Constitution. Well, how does it work? How does it do that? Well, you divide government. And if you divide government and then you limit the power of government, now that secures the liberty to the people so they can govern themselves. And here's a young lady who will tell you, 3, 4, 5 years ago, she said, I didn't know any of this. And now engaging, learning by application, Steve. That's how we learn best. You don't learn golf by reading a book. You're not going to learn the Constitution by reading a book, but you're going to engage, and there are 2 million people right now growing at 30,000 a month that are learning the Constitution and self-government by engaging.
Right now in Washington, the whole Obamacare, we get to really repeal it, get to kind of repeal it, or we get to fully replace it, and maybe not replace it later. It's the progressive dog whistle. There's this notion that government has to do something all of the time. So let me put the same question I asked you a minute ago in a different context right in your own wheelhouse. What is your confidence level that the politicians on the state level, if we did return all this power to the states, what is your confidence level that the politicians on the state level, if that power was handed to them? It's easy to say limited government now when the feds can come in anytime they want, threaten your governor with, we're going to take your funding away, and he surrenders on virtually anything you would take a stand on. Let's say we didn't have that dynamic and we actually did say we're going to give you guys the power back. What is the confidence that the state house politicians are any more able to say just because we can do a thing doesn't mean we should do that thing than the Capitol Hill politicians are?
Great question. Is it going to solve all the problems? Of course not. There is mess and problem and confusion with government. But when you do have those problems, you've got an outrage that shows up, in my case, right on the Salt Lake City steps.
What's funny is Todd is looking at me like, hey, wait a minute. I thought I was the COS skeptic around here. You're asking all of my questions. Actually, I'm an advocate of what you're doing. You just caught me on a bad day. But go ahead and finish.
No. But so you get a Des Moines out of control. You've got people that can mobilize. I mean, you can drive your tractors right up to the Capitol steps if they're out of control. And that happens. And so you hear people and they mobilize. And guess what? In my case, they're my neighbors. They're the people that put me in office. And you can come right to my house. You've got my address. You know right where I'm going to be. You know where I'm at in the Capitol. You know when I'm having a town hall meeting. And you get people eyeball to eyeball, and you get that kind of accountability. Government's never going to be perfect, and if we're not watching and maintaining and being vigilant, government grows. That's what it does.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, talking about the Convention of States and what its momentum looks like post-election. Utah State Representative Ken Ivory is here with us. You're going around the country to advocate for this. Why?
Well, it's the answer. It's in the handbook. You know, when I was called in a church leadership position, I was a counselor to the leader, and problems would come up, and we wanted to help our people, and I would come up with these creative solutions, and he would just kind of sit back and let me take the line and run with it, and I'd keep coming up with these great creative solutions, and finally he would say, you know, Brother Ivory, I got an idea. Why don't we check the handbook? And we have a handbook that was given to us by wise men whom I believe God raised up. I mean, they talked over and over and over again about the miracles, you know, the great fog in the Battle of Long Island, to cross the Delaware, all of the things that happened. Our founding was improbable and miraculous. And it took a lot of faith. And those people that met devised a system that never existed before in the history of the world and unleashed the greatest prosperity and creativity, the creative genius of our people, trusting them with liberty and property and self-governance, and the opportunity to fail and learn how to move forward in those things, created the greatest wealth and peace and prosperity the world's ever known. Well, we have that opportunity to move forward, and it's right there in the handbook that they gave us. Government exists to secure our rights. We divide government and limit government so that the people have the maximum amount of liberty to use their God-given genius to create, and that's where we get wealth and peace and prosperity. The more government expands, liberty contracts. So going back to that handbook, and the formula they gave us was Article 5. You state legislators, Madison said introducing the Bill of Rights, you state legislatures are the sure guardians of the people's liberty. You can resist federal assumption better than any power on earth can do when he was introducing the Bill of Rights under Article 5. I got to tell you, Steve, I meet with state legislators all over the nation. These are people that are in office because of their kids, because of their businesses, because of their neighbors, because they have a neighbor that said, you know, I had this great idea for a business, but all the federal regulations scare me, and I'm afraid I'll go to jail if I do it, so I'm just not going to create. They have people that are creating, and they get out and they're doing these wonderful things, and they get so much regulation, 5,000 federal felonies, they can't even count them anymore. And like the folks up in Oregon, the Hammonds, that were just trying to tend their land with forest management using fire as a technique that's been done forever, they're in jail now for 5 years under anti-terrorism and death penalty acts for doing what everyone in the trial said was beneficial to the land. So no, it's time that we have that remedy right there in the handbook to re-clarify the divisions and limits of government so we unleash that liberty and we get that creative genius going again.
Do you think what you're advocating is a bit of a paradox in that the argument could be made if we were the people capable of doing what this process calls us and demands of us to do if we open this door, we probably wouldn't have let it get to this point in the first place. What do you say to that?
It's an interesting point, but every generation has its battle, has its challenge.
Because Todd's nodding his head yes, because I'm speaking his love language. So yes. So go ahead.
Every generation has its moment. The fact is, it is here now. I mean, next week, we can throw the party for the $20 trillion debt. $20 trillion. It takes 32,000 years to count to a trillion. I wish we weren't here, but we are. And so you see more and more people stepping up going, I know what that's going to do to my kids and my grandkids. And I met them in your state house today. I said, why are you doing it? A 23-year-old ran for office. He said, because all of my farmer neighbors are so sick of the EPA. They're so sick of federal bureaucrats coming in as judge, jury, executioner. I've got to step up and protect those people and do whatever I can. I see those people, Steve, all over the country that are stepping up on that. And so this is where we are. It got to a point in America where for 5 generations they governed themselves. And then King George as a 20-something came in and said, I got to put you under my thumb. Mm-hmm. And they said, we're going to fight a battle for that. Well, fortunately, they gave us a system. We don't have to fight with muskets and pitchforks anymore. They gave us the constitutional tools to redeclare independence and to restore those balances, that division and limit on government. It's right there in the Constitution.
Have you seen, how's your momentum been impacted by the election results? Have people had a tendency to say, yeah, I'm for this outside the box idea, but oh wait, Team GOP won, so maybe we don't need to do this now because they'll handle everything for us in Washington from here?
Yeah, there's some of that. I want to check back and say this is inside the box because it's right there in the handbook, right? So this inside the box idea.
The Constitution is outside the box to most Americans today.
To many, sadly, to many. But yeah, there are some that say that, hey, I just want to go back to riding my four-wheeler and relaxing, and the troops have come, and
Trump's got this,
and we're Trump drunk.
Yeah,
right. But that doesn't take away the thousands of judges in the federal judiciary. It doesn't take away the armies, literally armies, SWAT teams in the federal agencies. That when I was in law school, my administrative law teacher said, if you work for a government agency, your job is to grow the agency, grow its money, grow its power, because that's how you grow the agency. And they're teaching law students grow the agency. Those people are still armed, I say. They're still armed with an ideology to grow, and government's tendency is to grow. So as much as we may get a partial reprieve, now is absolutely the time to put in structural side rails, guardrails. We have the opportunity to do that. We have a president.
So that way you're
Congress.
not one election away from losing fundamental liberties.
Exactly. Give you an example. I mean, Hillary Clinton, when she was running in Utah, she said her policy was leave it in the ground, leave everything in the ground. We're a public land state in Utah. That would have cost my state 100,000 jobs, $11 billion annual hit to GDP. And that was her policy. We're one election away from that coming right back and moving forward, when we've got the opportunity to unleash that American genius. The recipe's simple: secure people in their life, liberty, property, let them govern themselves. That's where peace and prosperity comes from.
Simple's not easy, though.
Simple's not easy. That's right.
Simple is not always easy. State Representative Ken Ivory is here with us from Utah. He is traveling around the country to advocate for the Convention of States. He's here in our backyard in Iowa. When we come back, I'll have just a couple of quick moments before the end of the hour. And I'm sure there's people in our audience that would like to know how they can get involved. And where are you guys at from a critical mass standpoint? How many states do you have locked in? How many states are truly locked in? I mean, how many states, we issued some kind of proclamation. How many states are legislatively prepared to act on this? How many states are required? And what is, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about this because we'll have a break. That's why I'm teasing this. What is the one part about this that you're worried about? Right? Everything has a fail-safe. Everything has a trade-off. Everything has a thermal exhaust port. Okay? So what's the thermal exhaust port? What is, if we build this, if we decide the Death Star is open for business, what's the part that you're like, that's the part I'm worried about? We'll see if we can get an answer to that question here in a moment.
You're listening to Steve Deace. From the front lines of the battle for liberty, the Steve Deace Show.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by Conservative Review on the Salem Radio Network. Utah State Representative Ken Ivory is here with us. He is traveling the country on behalf of the Convention of States. So first and foremost, Ken, if people in our audience want to get involved, they want to know where their state stands on this, what would you recommend they do?
Yeah, get involved. Go to cosaction.com. Convention of States, cosaction.com. You can also go to conventionofstates.com, get more information on the information side of things.
Where are you guys at? How many states are truly on board? What does it take for critical mass for this to actually go down?
Yeah, now's absolutely the time. 8 states have already passed their resolution. So you've got 8 states. You need to get to 34 to apply. We've got a clear path this year to 23 more states. House and Senate, you've got 33 states that are completely under Republican control. Now, with the 2 million people that are grassroots advocates, activists in the Convention of States growing at 30,000 a month, we're not stopping at 33 states. We've got people mobilizing to get to 34 states, get to 38 states that understand it's time to take our voice back. So the process, you've got 34 states that apply and say, we want to have a meeting of states. We want to get together and have a subcommittee that discusses how we get our voice back, how we reestablish the divisions and the limits on government, so with liberty I can go create. You get 34 states pass a resolution. That sets the agenda. You can't talk about things outside of that agenda. Convention of States is fiscal restraints, reduce the size and scope of the federal government, and consider term limits on federal officers. So the convention gets together, they discuss proposals, and if they pass anything out, then that has to be ratified by 38 states. 3/4 of the states. If they do, then that becomes part of the Constitution and provides meaningful checks, puts real teeth in the 10th Amendment. So now the states are back in the game to be the watchdog, to be the external check that we're supposed to be to the federal government.
Final question. Got about a minute or so here. What is your thermal exhaust port? I mean, I agree with you, and I've read the Cleon Scows and stuff too. I agree our founding's a 5,000-year leap, so to speak. But even that wisdom and the aid of providence, you cannot concoct a system of government that can overcome human complacency. Just a willingness to voluntarily abrogate your legacy as a people as we are living in our day and age. So there's your thermal exhaust port for a constitutional republic. What's the thermal exhaust port of this? What is the area where you have to make sure the blind side is covered if we go down this road?
Yeah, very similar to what you said. I mean, there are people that don't want you to have liberty. There are people that are invested in being parasites to a centralized government. They're going to fight wildly to keep that host alive. And so we have to mobilize.
They're going to try to intimidate your individual legislatures, your individual meetings. They're going to say you don't know parliamentary procedure, right?
Right. I mean, you've seen the book Intimidation Game, Kim Strassel. I mean, it's all of that and more. Right? They're going to come out and wage war everywhere they get. That's why we've got the 2 million people that have already stepped up, 30,000 people a month growing. COSaction.com, get on board, and we're going to take our voice back. And it's up to us. We're the boss in this system. If we want to be treated like the boss, we have to act like the boss.
Well said. Ken, thanks for joining us.
I've just met like the kindest, most welcoming people who have made me feel empowered.